This is a Grade 5 Mission 3 overview for Zearn Math. If you're using Eureka materials, it's the Module 3 overview. Title is Add and Subtract Fractions. Central focus is fraction operations, specifically adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, unlike units. In the fourth grade, they've been working on fractions since the third grade, but in the fourth grade, they learned to add and subtract fractions with like units or like denominators. So hopefully they've had enough exposure to that to be fluent. And if that's the case, then really the difference is just making equivalent fractions to add with unlike units, which they also worked on in the fourth grade and the third grade. So they should have had plenty of practice with making equivalent fractions. The progression is a review of fraction equivalence. Again, hopefully you can move through this somewhat quickly. And then they build on fractional equivalence using that to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. And they move from models to numeric understanding. The prerequisite skill or fluency practice that's going to enhance the teaching in this unit. So in your 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, you've set aside for additional fluency practice outside of the core. Hopefully I recommend each teacher does that. A lot of teachers have programs they use that generate daily worksheets or whatever. That's all fine. That's great. But make sure you add in some of these specifically during this time. Probably some of it's already in the core materials, but add more of your own to make the instruction flow more fluently or more easily. And that would be adding and subtracting fractions of like denominators. They learned this in fourth grade. It's a pretty easy skill to retain, so hopefully it doesn't take much work. Making equivalent fractions as well. Work on that using just multiplying and dividing. No modeling here, just repetitive skill practice. The core fluency moving forward here is part-whole relationships, as it always is with fractions. And I should have put in here also adding and subtracting fractions of unlike denominators is something you want to, if you want to have fluency time following up lessons, prior taught lessons, spend more time working on that fluency and moving forward, it will become a spiral fluency. The foundational goal, adding and subtracting fractions with unequal denominators. That's what's going to affect them for the rest of their math careers. This is one of the most difficult concepts for students to retain. And I think this would be interesting to have a conversation with teachers about, but my guess is that they do well with this, adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. And then when you move in and introduce multiplying fractions is when it starts to deteriorate. Because by the time they get to higher grades, they're mixing up their rules. So it's really important that you work on concrete learning that's going to fix itself solidly into long-term memory. What doesn't go away? These are the things that you need to continue to work on from prior skills or from prior missions and prior years. So this slide's here just as a reminder. As you get busy, you feel like you're running out of time, you won't work on these things. You still need to, and the what doesn't go away skills, we're not talking about spending a long time on any given day, just minutes each day. Throw them a problem or two during warm-ups where they can review these skills. So all multi-digit fluencies they should be working on. Fluency practice, fractions, adding and subtracting like denominators, which is already built into your current fluencies, and then all fact fluencies, continue to revisit single-digit fluencies forever. Special notes, so if you're running short on time, especially in a year like the pandemic year, you're going to be limited physically with the time you have to spend with students. There's just some ideas in here for what to focus on. In topic A, you're making equivalent fractions. The curriculum uses models. I think they've probably seen some of these same models in prior years. The models are great. What students need to understand is that when they make an equivalent fraction, they haven't changed the value or magnitude of the fraction. They haven't changed the fact that it means the same amount of whatever it represented before. They've just changed the appearance of it, or they've renamed it in a manner of speaking. So these models show why that works, but the fluency practice, they just need to bang out making equivalent fractions by multiplying or dividing. Not a difficult thing. Topic B, they use a pictorial approach to add fractions of unlike denominators. Again, this is really good for conceptual understanding. The modeling, the pictures all help them to understand first why they make the equivalent fractions in topic A, why they're really generating the exact same fraction. Then in topic B, what it really comes down to is why that denominator ends up, after they've made the equivalent fraction, why that denominator doesn't change when they've done the adding. That's a big deal. That needs to be fixed in place. They need to conceptually understand why the denominator doesn't change, so that when they learn multiplication of fractions later in 5th and early in 6th, they don't start mixing up rules. But as before, use the models to develop conceptual understanding, but repetitive practice should be at the skill level only. So when they're adding fractions of unlike denominators, have them do it mathematically, and the mission does move into that. So have them multiply or divide to create equivalent fractions, and then just add tops and leave the denominator alone. Lots of practice, practice, practice. Can't practice this skill enough.